In this episode, we'll be looking at IT infrastructure and operation leaders and ask when they should implement machine learning.
Today, we see that about 70% of the budget is spent fixing things, and only 30% is going towards innovation. That's not enough.
That's the voice of Evelyn Oelek, the Vice President and Research Director at Forrester Research, who joins us on this podcast.
Typically, the signs we see are customers who are drowning in alert noise. They don't really know where to spend their time, which is sort of constant reactive firefighting, trying to keep things up and running. And then, even vision, like having an unclear picture of what the service quality is.
This is Andy Ray, co-founder and chief architect at Evanios. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are all the rage. This promising technology is pushing the development of self-driving cars, helping to improve medical diagnosis and speeding up electronic trading. But what's real when it comes to AI for enterprise IT? When should infrastructure and operations leaders implement machine learning? And what should they expect? I'm Mark Kendrick from Enterprise Management 360, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. We're joined by Evelyn Oelek, Vice President and Research Director for Forrester Research, and Andy Ray, co-founder and chief architect at Evanios, a company that makes software which helps large companies automate their IT operations. Okay, now let's get started with the first question. Evelyn, how are things out there in IT operations? What are you seeing going on today?
Mark, it depends on who you are when you're looking at the I&O organization. If we look across, there are three players really in enterprises. There's the business, the partner teams in technology management, such as application developers, enterprise architects, and then of course there's the IoT team itself. When you answer that from a business perspective, the business teams in most organizations today don't have a lot of interactions with I&O. They see and consume their services mostly. However, what they do see is maybe a bill of IT they pay for relative to the services they are offering, be it again supporting applications or bringing them to productions or the service desks. So that's one team. The other team, the technology partners such as application developers, are seeing to some extent I&O a little bit as a nuisance. I'm sad to say that, but they in AD&D have picked up Agile quite a bit. Now we do see DevOps picking up, and there are some verticals which are very hot in it, but Agile is all about supplying and fulfilling the demands of the customers with a customer obsession and customer experience driving within and externally from the customer. So sometimes there's a little bit of a stress between I&O and AD&D. Now, if you ask the I&O team themselves, they would say, well, we have a few challenges relative to the complexity we have to manage. We need to start automating, and we need to shift our cultures to become much more aligned in Agile. And then last but not least, they need to start thinking really how to become much more proactive, meaning the waiting for something to happen, that time is over. Particularly, again, as we start thinking customer obsession, if we're thinking about the new ways of delivering applications and services in the DevOps area. Now, one more point. There is vast differences in how mature I&O organizations are today across the world, across the different countries, and within the different verticals.
Andy, what's your comments?
Building on what Evelyn said, there's absolutely a huge wide variety of maturity levels, even within a single organization, right? So if you look at a single large organization, you have your CIOs and your CTOs who are shopping for, autonomous robots powered by AI. Meanwhile, operations professionals are still just really struggling to align their tools. Their hair's on fire. They're just struggling to keep the lights on. So that's a huge difference, right? What's great, though, is there are unifying technologies like Evanios, which can be implemented really at any maturity stage and really bring things together. So, this enables organizations to really start building momentum with machine learnings and AI, but also providing immediate tangible value along the way. So, we're talking about reducing your find and fix time significantly, and that can be done today, right?
To you, Evelyn, how much time and money is being wasted on find and fix activities for today's businesses?
We have an animal called Moose inside Forrester, and Sometimes I've been known as the Moose Lady. I'll explain that quickly to you. Moose stands for, if you write that out, the maintenance of ongoing systems and equipment. And we have a lot of research at Forrester around that. But back to what Andy said, today we see that about 70% of the budget is spent in this moose, meaning fixing things, really looking after the systems, the applications, etc., etc. And only 30% is going towards innovation. So the innovation of potentially leveraging AI and other analytics capabilities, that's not enough. Let me break this down for you because I think there is a really, really big value point in here. When we look at mean time to repair today, the time to fix things, there are 4 categories in mean time to repair. There's the mean time to identify, that's when we find it out, the mean time to know, the mean time to fix, and the mean time to verify. We find that organizations, I&O teams, spend, again, 70% of their work in this mean time to know. That is a lot of time just looking around and figuring out what is happening, who has done what. That's not sufficient in the time of where we are. In 2017, we have customers who truly want to make sure that they're ordering something and they're getting it, they get a confirmation. Or if I book a flight, I log in, I need to immediately see my boarding pass. So all of those, the speed and the expectations from our end customers has shifted and must shift how we are doing things. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge. And with that, management, again, that word which means so much, but still is still in many organizations reduced to monitoring, must be left shifted. We must be thinking about how can we predict before things happen, because reacting is very expensive. Predicting is much better. It brings us much more value across the organization and aligns us in I&O with our friends in AD&D. Sometimes I tell my clients, it moves you from a blue-collar worker to those who are in the white jackets, really predicting what has happened. And AI really has that capability through a variety of its subcomponents.
So, Evelyn, look, before moving on to the next question, we've probably got some people listening to this podcast who are not particularly tech-minded. A subject that's come up around this is MTTK. Is it possible just to give like a glossary term?
Sure. MTTK, again, stands for mean time to know. That is really the time upon a team, either in a war room or in an outage or in a whatever performance situation, to understand what artifacts do we need to know relative to the situation. Is it certain baselines, certain log files we need to look up, certain performance indicators, what do we have? That is really what it is all about. The mean time to know, to figure out what is the root cause of what is causing the problem or the issue or the incident.
Thank you, Evelyn. That was really useful. So, Andy, does machine learning really make sense for IT operations? And really, what are the potential benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to kind of comment on what Evelyn said, I mean, this sort of promise of evolution has been out there for quite some time, right? I mean, I think, that whole self-healing word, Evelyn, I remember that from the 1998 BMC patrol days, right? So, I mean, this is not a new mission, but at the same time, I think we're able to make much more strides with the technology today, and we're actually delivering on some of those promises that were made years ago, right? So, so to your question, Mark, I mean, does machine learning really make sense for IT operations and the benefits, right? Absolutely, machine learning can play the role of sort of a seasoned infrastructure operations professional. So, it's sort of the machine using great judgment, having a great memory. So it absolutely makes sense for IT operations, right? It's sort of a power tool. Is an example of what some people are doing with our technology. Evanios can automatically score events, which helps an I&O professional get immediate understanding of where they should focus their time. And I think that's probably the most important asset we have, is where we spend our time, right? So the score is typically a combination of the service impact, the historical response or trauma experienced by the organization, and the likelihood that the event is a leading indicator, right? So we proactively identify leading indicators to outages so that ops teams can get ahead of these incidents, right? So really, these are the same things, and exact same things that an IT operations pro would do manually if he had hours of time to dedicate to every single event, every single outage, every single metric, right? But using machine learning, we're able to automate it and perform that in milliseconds on every event, right? The key benefit you see is the reduction in find and fix labor. So the MTTR, the mean time to know, the things we just kind of talked about, but also, they're able to demonstrate more proactivity to the business. So, and that's improving service quality, right? So, in summary, IT ops teams can use machine learning as sort of a power tool. They can do more with less, enabling them to focus on higher value tasks, right? So enabling them to put on those white jackets and, maybe step up and start talking to the business more, as opposed to just making phone calls, troubleshooting 24/7, right?
Andy, I love your word power tool. I wish I would have heard this before in many of my inquiries, and here is why. Many of the I&O folks I speak to at the subject matter expert level and above, even their managers and team members are saying, I have Angst, again, an easy word for me to say as a German. I'm fearful that I will be no longer adding value when we bring in all of this artificial intelligence and all these automation capabilities. But positioning it as a power tool is a great way because I think it augments them. Yes, there are manual activities which no longer should be done by individuals because that's just the way it is. We are needing to shift into industrialization. Let's be real. However, the value these people have, the knowledge these people have, can be focused much more on action items which can resolve things before they happen. So that is a much higher value to the person. We see that today with some system administrators who are shifting into developer roles. They become engineers, and we've opened their eyes, thinking that in the past they were very fearful, but they're now seeing a shift. That angst is going away slowly, but I think we still need to be sensitive towards it.
Absolutely. I think in a business, there's always more to do. We can always be more proactive. We can always improve quality of service. And I think, as a trend, people are having to do more with less, right? Technology and complexity is increased. Customer expectations have increased. And realistically, it's not like we've staffed up, to deal with that, right? So we have to have power tools. So I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, budgets are not increasing either. 5%, I've just seen statistics. Budgets are only going up 5%, which is not a lot.
What's real? What is readily deliverable today, Andy?
Yeah, so everything I spoke about in sort of the examples I just mentioned are deliverable today, right? So we're seeing customers automatically score their events and become more proactive, right? This is happening now in production at Fortune 500 companies, right? So we can absolutely provide meaningful insights and power tools that can improve IT operations today. At the same time, there is a lot of vision out there in the industry that isn't yet deliverable, and sometimes that clouds the conversation, right? In my opinion, clients need to filter that out and really focus on what can they get done today? How do they start momentum, right? So for example, can the industry deliver on the promise of magical autonomous robots that use AI to completely automate the resolution of incidents before they happen? And, not just yet. I think that's definitely the direction, but, we're not quite there yet. To draw a little bit of a parallel to a similar challenge, right? The media loves to talk about self-driving cars. It's a hot thing on TechCrunch, whatever you're into, and wherever you consume news. You're going to hear something about it, right? So this month, Uber has a self-driving car program on a test in Arizona, right? And the stats are so far of the 20,000 miles they've recorded, the safety drivers, that's the human in the front seat, has had to intervene an average of once per mile. So 20,000 miles, 20,000 interventions, right? So they're not quite there yet. Are they heading in the right direction? Sure. But they're just not quite there yet. So if you compare the challenges of what we deal with in IT operations to what you deal with trying to navigate the square street grids of Phoenix, I would say our job's harder. I think we have something a lot harder than self-driving cars to really provide that in-state mission at the end, right? So in summary, with IT operations tools, we're getting there. We're providing value along the way, but clients need to ensure they set their expectations appropriately so we can really build momentum together. And I'm a huge believer in momentum. You have to build momentum to start doing organizational change.
Okay, and Andy, you're talking about momentum there, things that to look for, and you're saying about this Uber and self-driving cars and all this. Just stepping back a moment and thinking of someone who perhaps has got a mild interest in this and trying to look into implement it into their business. Other than giving you a call today saying, hey, I want this thing, what steps or signs should they be looking for to see if it's something that actually fits for themselves?
In a nutshell, yes. I would say any organization who provides any substantial, IT service or business service to their clients needs to be looking at this type of technology. They need to be going this direction, right? So, in a nutshell, yes, you can plug this directly into your business today. Signs where it's like, wow, we really need to look at it, yesterday, last year, things where we need technology immediately. Typically the signs we see are customers who are drowning in alert noise. So they're just flooded with noise. They can't really see the forest through the trees. They don't really know where to spend their time, which is sort of constant reactive firefighting, trying to keep things up and running. And then, even vision, like having an unclear picture of what the service quality is, having extended outages, too much manual labor to find and fix. I mean, these are kind of the common themes that we see and hear when we get inquiries, and they're things that, obviously we're directly targeted at reducing. At the same time, though, everyone can always get better. You don't have to weigh 500 pounds to start a weight loss program, right? Or start getting healthier. So I think everybody needs to be aggressive and looking into this type of technology. But yeah, those are the kind of things we typically see when someone's getting high value.
Companies who are able to successfully implement IT tools and machine learning, looking ahead, how are they set up for business from an architecture or process perspective?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, rich integration between the tools and processes is key. So you have to kind of factor in, what are you doing with ITSM? What are you doing with DevOps? What are you doing with app dev and deployment? What are you doing with IT operations, right? So all of that needs to be factored in your end state, right? From an architectural perspective, we believe that, building a solution on a unified, yet an open platform is really a great head start. That's a great foundation to build upon to start to pull those pieces together. So, for example, our solution's built directly on the ServiceNow ITSM platform, right? And that's made it very easy for us to keep our client processes in sync, right? So we can quickly go pull stuff from change management. We can quickly go pull things from project portfolio management and tie in those metrics into what we do in IT operations. So when someone comes to us with a complex use case, it's very easy to go and address that customer unique use case. I think I would look for things like that, where you have sort of a unified open platform and you're factoring all your processes.
Hey, Andy, I want to challenge you a little bit on that, because I get this question quite a bit as an analyst. Customers have bought into other solutions already. I have a sharp tool in my closet and I like to use that. The developers are using that. How and who, from a practical perspective, I know you said integrated and open, but help me understand, how does that play in the ecosystem? The partners, are there specific additional integrations you guys have which are key to think through? Because you mentioned ITSM, of course, ServiceNow, I understand that, but anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds a little like I'm talking on both sides of my mouth, right? Where it's sort of like you have to have a unified platform, but it needs to be open and integrated, right? But I really believe that, right? So, from what we do, we would encourage customers to start by harnessing the data they have if they're going to improve IT operations. If you have existing mature technologies and those are working well, when you pick a vendor, whether it's us or someone else, use those, right? There's no reason to throw out something that works well, that's mature within your organization. So for example, with us, if a customer has, maybe like a Dynatrace doing APM work, a Microsoft SCOM doing some server monitoring, and SolarWinds doing network monitoring. And those tools are loved by your team. They work well. In some cases, I would argue some of those are best of breed tools, right? So those are being successful. Like, great, let's take the data from those through some packaged integrations. Let's start correlating and let's get some predictive insights on top of that. At the same time, if those aren't working for you, great, let's talk about replacing them, right? We've got some technology that can replace them. So I think, us as a vendor, we have to sort of show up, work with what you have, and help you extend what you have, but also offer alternatives. But I think to be successful, I think everybody has to play nice with others, and I think that's really key.
That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
Another thing too, as far as what we're seeing out there, as far as how people are implementing this stuff, we're seeing a big surge of sort of hybrid customer partner roles. So many in the MSP space. We have a lot of clients like Atos or Fujitsu who sort of bought the solution internally initially. They had a specific internal need, they bought the solution, and then they turn around and they expand the use into their customer base. And they say, wow, this is a great offering that we can carve up. And I think that's actually along with their strategy and along with a lot of shared service organizations and just typical large corporations now, is sort of, I've got something, how do I use it for other things, or how do I help my customer partners and exchange services and work together? So I expect that trend to continue as well.
Yeah, we see the same. Just to add to what you said, Andy, we see the same. We see that starting from an individual who has done some education and looked around and understands that there is a different way of doing things, introducing that into a project, then introducing it into a further bigger team, and then from there it goes into multiple teams. And as you know, as there are multiple teams involved in it, it starts to become bigger, the integrations become more challenging, the partners become who you have to work with becomes more complex, but it moves up in terms of the attention of the executives, and the outcome becomes bigger, right? There is less of reactivity, there's more proactivity. People are starting to see, and they go, and I hear the business partners in the team meeting I have inquiries with, they're saying, wow, this is what you guys have done, this is great, let's get more. And executives get to see that there are some great outcomes. So yeah, I like that. That's a good approach.
I kind of guess I know what you're going to say, Evelyn, but is there a risk to not moving forward in machine learning? And, does a wait and see approach make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you can't not do this. You cannot afford not to look into that. So you have to do this as an organization. Unfortunately, there is incredible amount of competitive pressure out there. We want to make sure that organizations know you have to look at this. Here's a couple of data points. We asked technology decision makers if they're interested in planning on adopting predictive analytics within the next 12 months, and that was just a recent survey. Interestingly, 51% already had adopted some of that, and 51% they already have, and the rest of them is still interested in. So that is quite interesting. There is incredible interest, and organizations are seeing that. Another important point around this is that there is no perfect crystal ball to solve all of that. And we have a research report by my fellow analyst, Mike Terry. There are advantages and there are disadvantages of all of that. You need to understand what you get into, and you need to educate yourself. So I think that's most important. Start there. Second, outages, crashes, and poor performances are reducing customer satisfaction. I mean, the recent particular airline outage I actually got stuck in, I was very disappointed because I didn't get home. Let me give you some additional data. Ponemon Institute says that the average cost of an unplanned data center outage is slightly more than $7,900 a minute. If you add this up together on an hour, that's $474,000 an hour. That's an incredible amount of dollars, or if you convert that to euros, or British pounds, or whatever else is out there, it's very, very difficult to justify that. So we have a challenge of making sure that we become much more proactive. And then there is the value equation. This one is near and dear to my heart as an INO professional. I've always been in INO, and hopefully I will stay in INO. We don't have a good reputation in some organizations of the INO team. So in Forrester, we no longer talk about IT as information technology. We talk a lot about business technology. Business technology is necessary for this transition into the digital revolution, into the digital business. And INO folks are stepping up to the plate to really, truly provide value of understanding services and becoming much more involved in the predicting what can happen in conjunction with marketing or in conjunction with salespeople. And of course, in that integrated product team in the DevOps world, where we have business people, developers, operations folks, infrastructure folks, security folks, to understand what needs to be done. And again, AI and the capabilities of example Evanios are absolutely critical.
Let's say it's 2020 and so taking in these figures and everything like this, let's say everyone's adopted this solution which we've been talking about throughout the podcast. What do you think business and organizations will be like?
I think it is an aligned team. It is an organization which leverages technology to truly retain, win, and excel at how they serve their customers. Because again, competition is not, it's not sleeping. So that approach towards customer experience in a holistic perspective, aligning folks in the business with the technology partners, and of course within their vertical, because for the Department of Motor Vehicle here in the United States, it looks very different than for a hospital or for an airline. And we talked about maturity, right? We have to bring that into consideration. But truly, I envision by 2020, we have a partnership. We have organizations who partner across these silos of functions and leverage AI and its capabilities to truly drive new ways of working with our customers and serving them. I think that's most important.
Now, unfortunately, we're getting towards the end of the podcast now, but what I wanted to do was just to kind of offer our listeners some takeaways. So, Evelyn, what are some immediate action items or pieces of advice you have for the listeners evaluating machine learning's role in IT operations?
I think the first one is highest level, at the highest importance or priority is the learning and absorbing what is out there and then adopting it. I think Andy alluded to that as well. As machine learning is part of AI, it's important to understand the topic at large. You have to study and learn it, inspire others, and really get into it. This takes time because there are different chapters which can be applied, which makes sense. Machine learning is at the pragmatic state today in some areas, and I think Andy made a good point. There are the 20,000 miles and 20,000 interventions, that there is certain areas which are pragmatic and certain other areas are still hypothesis. Understand that, because when you understand that, you can then apply it. Second, find a partner somewhere within the functional team to partner with in terms of what's the application of it. Where can you actually, in a pragmatic state, get invited and included? What are some things you can do around a particular service or a particular application or a particular product your company itself is doing? That is very important. And of course, that cannot be done with working with the application development and the delivery. Sometimes we call them the AD&D team. Partnering with those folks who are much, much more playing a role in the development of all of that is important. So again, learn, get familiar, dig in, do some weekend or nighttime reading. Find a possible scenario within your organization which is already thinking of that or where you can add value. And then of course, as you find that, you need to partner with your AD&D team, because I&O to some extent can do some things, as we know, but not really everything.
Andy, what do you think?
To expand on Evelyn's last point, right? I mean, as far as tying in the AD&D teams, the application teams, I mean, you have to do that. And I think that's actually, one of the key points of why you have to do that is what she mentioned about competitive pressure, right? I mean, IT is now in direct support of the business, almost anything you do, right? So the idea of having a room full of guys whose job it is to manage servers is not going to work, right? You're at a disadvantage when you're providing value back to the business. When you compare yourself to a team that's looking at the complete picture of sort of the service delivery and user experience, right? So we have to include app teams in the play. We have to include marketing teams. We have to know that what's the next thing rolling out? Why is that rolling out? How many customers do we expect to use that? Why is that going to provide us a differentiator in the market for our business? All that stuff has to be tied in with what the rest of the organization is doing. So as we move forward with IT operations, we have to be aware of that, and we have to be integrated, right? So that's probably number one, just kind of extending what Evelyn said. Number two, I mean, as far as choosing a vendor or partner, so if you've learned about AI, you've learned about machine learning, you want to start looking forward, recognize that the vision and the ability to execute are not the same thing, right? Back to what we were talking about with a certain vendor who had self-healing technology advertised in 1998. That didn't really work very well. So you have to look for vendors who can really prove the exact technology you need and cut through the hype, right? So make sure your expectations are aligned with what's deliverable so you're prepared for success and everybody can go off into the sunset together, right? So I think that's key, find a good partner. And then the last thing I would say is, a small step forward with this type of technology is better than no step at all, right? So, I said before, I believe momentum is key to any project or driving change within an organization. So find a small scope, understand it, find something you can succeed with, get started now, and get rolling, right? So if this is a $10,000 project that's going to save $100,000, great. Let's do that. Let's start the momentum. So it doesn't have to be a giant bite of the elephant. It can be a small bite, right? And also just, as far as prerequisites, I mean, to make improvements in IT operations, don't let people tell you need the perfect CMDB. You don't need the perfect APM implementation. I mean, you can really get started now. You can start providing value back to the business. Basically, trust me, you can.
Thank you both very much for your time today. It's been a great discussion. I feel like I've learned absolutely loads, and I hope the listeners more clued up now on what directions they can take. If you want to know more about this subject area, please visit Forrester, that's Forrester with 2 R's, that's forrester.com, and Evanios, that's Evanios, that's evanios.com. Many thanks for listening. We've been Enterprise Management 360. Goodbye.